I would describe my role with the Toronto Marlies as a bridge to finish my master's degree, and then you get into the real world and somebody's like, okay, well, we're putting together a brand plan. We don't care what you learned in your theory-based class. They think they want to work in sports, so they think that automatically means they have to be the GM, or they have to be a coach, or they have to be an athletic therapist. There are so many different things that you can do.
You are now listening to the MVP podcast, where we break down the business of sports. My name is Courtney.
And I'm James.
And on this episode, we spoke to the manager of business operations for the Toronto Marlies Hockey Club of the American Hockey League.
Yeah, this episode is for you if you want to start or accelerate your career on the business side of sports. There are a ton of gems on internships and job opportunities. What I really liked about this episode was breaking down how to work with a small team in a big market. And lastly, the challenges of growing a fan base. This episode was really fun. I think I really enjoyed this episode. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Marian Agyei-Gyamera. Right off the bat, because we kind of know what you do, but we want to know what you do. So can you give us, like, if we were to meet in an elevator and I just said, hey, like, oh, hey, how you doing? Like, what do you do for work? How would you break that down?
This is always an interesting question because I get asked this a lot. Like, I feel like when you work at a big company, you meet people, or like just when you live in the city, they always want to know what you do. And I feel like I don't do a good enough job of describing it. But I would describe my role with the Toronto Marlies as a bridge between what we do on the hockey side, connecting back to what we do on the corporate side. So I'm the manager of business operations and work at MLSE, so Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. We have a lot of internal corporate departments that help support what all of our teams do. So our basketball team, hockey team, football team. So I work with everybody from our ticket sales to membership, marketing, game presentation, community relations, media relations. What other departments do we have? Literally like food and beverage, building ops, just to make sure that any type of like vision or like level of excellence we want to achieve on the hockey side that we want to correlate over to the business side is done well. So like making sure we're keeping our departments accountable, making sure we're providing any type of like front office input, any visions that we're setting at the beginning of the season or goals, we're making sure that we're implementing them along the way, approving any type of things that are going to be featuring our players or our brand. So yeah, like I said, serving as a bridge between those two gaps, but also making sure that I'm like holding the excellence of the brand in my hand and making sure that things go as they should. I don't know if that described it well enough, but
that was really good.
There's so many different pathways to go down with that. But the first thing that comes to my mind is I got to ask, being so collaborative, what percentage, obviously roughly, but like how much strategy are you doing versus how much time do you get to actually execute on things? Are you just tied up in a lot of planning meetings and then you're kind of making sure everybody's on the same page, or like, do you get handed projects that you got to see end to end on your own?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I would say there's a lot of planning involved in my role. I think because we are a smaller part of the organization, there are a lot of times where I am like standing in the gap and like doing a lot of like the execution and practical things. Like I think about some of our community engagement, relationship building that way. Like there are times where I'm reaching out to communities and new groups. And if it means like having to go visit Launchpad, like I'm out there making sure that we're getting things done. But again, like a lot of planning, a lot of making sure that we're fulfilling strategy, connecting back to some of our visions and our goals for the season. And if it requires me to be like in the battlefield getting things done, then I'll be there.
Just by any means necessary, just get it done.
Necessary, for sure.
I feel like that's a common theme in sports. I've noticed some people like yourself, you got an advanced degree, you got a master's of sports management from Western.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some other people, they like myself, I have a degree, but I don't have a master's degree. I played and I've been around the business. But then once you kind of get into the sports business, it's really like whoever's willing to work hardest. I feel like those are the people who survive. What's your experience been like? I know you started as an intern or came through an internship program. What's your experience been like in terms of what transferred over from the academic side? And like, did you feel the internship really bridge that gap from what the books taught you to what you do on a day-to-day basis now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's funny. I think when you're in high school, they spend so much time encouraging you to go to school, right? Go pursue a post-secondary degree, go do this college program. University for me was always interesting because sport is just so practical. And when I spent time in school in undergrad doing my master's, everything was so theory-based. So like in theory, they were teaching me how to be a really good sport leader. In theory, they were preparing me how to be like a team president or like a GM. But we weren't always getting to apply things in a very practical way. And so I think for me, just I guess to kind of take a step back, when I was doing my undergrad degree, I actually went to school for political science and business. My parents are Ghanaian, so there's no version of this where they were like, yeah, like you go do sports, we're all for it. It was kind of like there's going to be a push and pull. So at some point I was like, okay, I'll be a lawyer, but how do I find ways to kind of build my resume as I go? So I remember first year university, I reached out to this organization called North Pole Hoops. The guy was like still doing his degree at Guelph Humber. I don't think he knew anything about HR. And I like reached out to him and I was like, hey, I'm just like this really big basketball fan. I would love to work for you. Like, let me oversee the women's version of what you're doing in your organization. And that was my first internship ever. But it was kind of like, how do I make sure I'm picking up that practical experience along the way? At some point, I was the equipment manager for the football team at the University of Waterloo, then equipment manager for the women's hockey team. So for me, because I knew that the academic side of school was not always going to get me some of the practicality that I wanted, I was finding ways to fill in those gaps. I think one of the challenging things was when I did finish school and I realized, like, finish my master's degree and like, yes, they teach you all about being a critical thinker and like all of these things about theory. And then you get into the real world and somebody's like, okay, well, we're putting together a brand plan. We don't care what you learned in your theory-based class. This is what it actually looks like in real life. But I did also find that like I could come into certain conversations and have a little bit more insight or like, I don't know, like maybe more of a holistic view when I started looking at things in terms of like being solutions-based, being a critical thinker. And I think like being able to pursue that higher level of education has really helped me as I've kind of progressed up in my career. And I am required to do a little bit more decision-making, maybe not be as hands-on, utilize like my mental thinking and like strategy a little bit more. So I'm finding that I bridge the gap that way, but it's funny in academia and sport, we talk a lot about how do we create opportunities to bridge the gap between like what's happening in academia. They do all this research, but then also what's happening in sport and recreation at a practical level. So
do you find that experience, that academic experience, and also I'd say even the learned experience through the multiple internships you had, did those give you a different type of confidence when you step into those rooms? Because I know me personally, there's some rooms I find myself in sometimes. I look around, I'm like, there's some heavy hitters in the room right here. And, you know, I guess that could be intimidating for certain people at different stages in their career, but you fall back on that experience, or does that help you feel prepared for the moment? Has a moment ever felt too big?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, like right now I'm in year 8 of my my sports career. So I've worked outside of internships for 8 years in this space. So like, I feel like nothing trumps me right now. But I think like one of the first few internships I had was at Canada Basketball. And I think that for me was very like, I was starstruck quickly and then like very quickly reminded that these people are human. So I think that helped me in every single room that I've been in there on after. Like you end up at that place, I ended up working with Rowan Barrett. So RJ Barrett's dad, who was like the nicest person ever, but like people who had worked in with Team Canada, sometimes we would have players come in. That was the year that Pan Am was happening. So you meet these people and you're like, okay, they're regular human beings, they're athletes that need things, they're people that work in sport leadership that like need our assistance. Like these are regular, normal people. And I think like the ability to not be stumped by like who people are has really helped me getting into a place where like now I'm in contact with C-suite members. When I worked for the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2021, like I wasn't just working with like coordinators or managers. I was getting to work with like our president and our director of analytics and our director of video and scouting. So like you're working with these people who have a plethora of knowledge and have also experienced things in like professional sports. But like, I don't know, there was a sense of like calmness when I got there. I just consistently reminded myself that like we're all regular people. They've got a lot for me to learn. Like, how do I, show up in a really good way for me to kind of take in all that insight, but never feel like intimidated or like cowardice in my approach to them. So, yeah.
You know what's interesting? Like talking to you, we've had conversations back in university. I've known Marian for a long time now, and like I remember how you used to talk about how you're going to break into the sports world. And I know you always said you want to be an agent. Is that still on the table?
No. It's funny because like you mentioned, I always thought I wanted to be an agent, and I think I got to a point where I was kind of like, being an agent almost feels scary because your player could wake up one day and be like, yo, I don't want you representing me no more. there's always like this very distinct story. I hope this never comes back to like bite me in the butt. But I remember growing up, like for me, the idea of being an agent was really like big. I was really big on it because like movies like Jerry Maguire, but I also remember following LeBron James's story, right? Like he had this agent who got him this really big deal, who brought his friend along to like kind of like mentor him. And then when like contract renewal was up, LeBron was like, okay, well, my boy's going to be my agent. He knows everything that he needs to know. He's a professional. We're bringing him in the door. Like I'm letting go of my previous agent. So I remember that moment. I was kind of like, yo, an athlete can wake up one day and be like, this is over and said and done with. Like we're wrapping this up. I think I was probably looking at it with a very narrow view. Like as an agent, hopefully you've done a good job to build up a clientele, but a lot of it is kind of like that athlete trust and like having somebody be like, okay, I mess you right now with you right now, or like I'm not interested right now. I want to go. So I don't know that I want to be an agent. I think I do want to continuously be in a space where I get to work with athletes and help them develop their own brands or like build their own wealth or build their own identities. But I don't know about being an agent. I'd have to kind of take that back to the drawing board.
Yeah. I know that's something you're very passionate about because I remember when you're coming up, you were doing a lot of projects, you're building a lot of side hustles. I remember Mag Consulting. I remember you had a podcast, you were writing blog posts. Can you take us into that? Because I think people don't really understand, like you're mentioning like you went out and got these internships, but like you're a hustler. And kind of to like what Courtney was talking about, whoever is going to work the hardest is going to survive in this industry. Can you kind of break down like what you feel while you were doing those projects translated into helping you kind of acquire some of these internships or even acquire like the leadership program that you were able to be a part of at the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Yeah, no, that's a real question. It's funny. I think I got to a point where I was kind of like, okay, I know these are things that I want to do in sport, but the 9-to-5 jobs I was working wasn't giving me the experience I needed to eventually get to where I wanted to be. So I kept asking myself, like, how do I find that experience? How do I start to gain new skills? How do I start to develop things on my own? And I think like kind of the spirit of wanting to be an agent and helping people and developing them that in that way, I was like, okay, why don't I just start Megs? I know things about strategy. I know things about marketing, brand building. Why not start to develop things that way? So like started this company and then eventually was kind of like, okay, well, nobody really knows about it. So how do I promote it? Started a podcast. I remember I'd randomly like reach out to people I've never met a single day in my life. And I'd be like, hey, I've been following you for this time. I would love to hear more about your story. Would you be interested in coming on my podcast? And we would chat and like be able to build relationships that way. But for me, like it's always been, you're not going to get all of the experience that you need and all of the skills that you need from just one thing. It's been weird for me right now working my job that I'm working because I'm only working one job. It's almost felt uncomfortable because I'm so used to being like, how do I do like 7 projects at the same time, have 6 side hustles, do this, that, and the third to make sure that I get all the experience that I need. But I think it's okay to sometimes be in a space where you're like, okay, like I've hustled, let's maybe like reevaluate, take some space, take some time. And then when other projects pop up, like we can give ourselves a space and time to do that as well. But yeah, it's big learning experience, kind of like being an entrepreneur and juggling all of that while working a 9-to-5.
So what would you say that you had a bit of a personal brand before you stepped into these things? Obviously you have what's on your resume, but in my opinion, these days and age, your resume is like a 2-dimensional thing and your personal brand is like a 3-dimensional representation of who you are, because there's more depth to it. You could watch a video, you could read a blog, and you could see someone expand on their thoughts. You having all of those kinds of things, do you feel like that helped you going into these situations?
That's a good question. I feel like, I mean, at some point I was able to use like Megs and like my podcast as part of my portfolio when I was applying for jobs. I think like it's funny, when I did do my interview with the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think somebody had mentioned the fact that I was an entrepreneur and that they had seen my website. But for me, I think it was ultimately just me utilizing it as kind of, you mentioned, another tool for when I was going into job interviews or like getting to connect with people, almost like another opportunity to legitimize like my work experience and who I was in this space. I think that was also at a time, it was like pre-pandemic, where everybody was kind of like, if there's like no social capital or like online capital they can connect you to, there's almost like this sense of like you're lacking in relevance. Not that I was an influencer or anything, but it was kind of like, if I was to Google you or like I go to your portfolio, who have you worked with or who's been like connected to you or who knows you? So yeah, I think that aspect was definitely very helpful. I don't think it like made a huge name for me in the sports scene, but kind of like,
no, but it gave the things that you said credibility, even in the interviews. Probably like you say, yeah, I've got strong written and oral communication skills like every other person on the face of planet Earth.
Right.
But you actually got the proof behind
Right.
that.
Here's
They
my
could
proof.
go do their
Exactly.
homework and see, okay, yeah, she does speak well. I could hear her on
Yeah.
a podcast for hours and hours.
Exactly.
So you were talking about you don't want to be an agent. Right now you're managing like biz ops. That's what it sounds like. What are your aspirations? Because I feel like there could be situations where there's jobs now that you see and you get to collaborate with folks. You might not have even known that their roles existed, or maybe it's in the same industry but maybe a different vertical. Are there things that are exciting to you about the sports world now that you've been in it for so long and you're becoming a veteran in the game, that you have other mountains you want to climb in the future? Are
Yeah.
there things that you're looking forward to trying, or throwing your name in a hat?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's funny. I feel like up until this point, like I'd spent so much time working so many jobs and like trying to create so many opportunities for me to get the necessary skills to get to this specific point. And like I've gone here and now I'm kind of like, okay, like I'm a little stumped. What comes next? I think another interesting thing about being in this space is that like unless you're very, very niche, like, you're going to be like an athletic trainer or like you want to be a hockey player or you're like a nutritionist, like there's a lot of general things that could potentially happen. There's no version of this where I could be like, okay, there's this one specific role that I really want and like can guarantee that I get there. But I think just based on like some of the mentors that I've had, some of the work experience that I've had, some of the things that I'm doing right now, like an ideal long-term job for me would be like the president of an NHL or NBA team. I would love that. Or I've been really intrigued by like PA, so like player associations. Um, right now I feel like a lot of my job, it sounds weird because we're like technically still a sports team, but like it's how do we advocate for what the Marlies deserve, right? Like we play in the AHL, and I think oftentimes people are like, oh, the Toronto Marlies are very lucky because they're in the same city as their affiliate. You don't always see that. Like you think about G League teams, you think about AHL teams, that's not always the case. So like our team is blessed in that regard, but we're also like competing almost with some of the teams that we're owned alongside. So I feel like I'm constantly advocating for like our players' needs or like the desires of our brand and our fans. And so I'm kind of like, there are times where I sit there and I'm like, I wish I could kind of do this for athletes. So yeah, if I could work for a PA, specifically the NBPA, if they're hiring and like they're listening to this, like you guys let me know eventually when my time is done here. Like I would love that, to know that I'm kind of contributing to not just like making athletes better athletes, but like creating more holistic experiences for them. How do they be better business people, better community people, better family members, better brands? Like, how do I ultimately help contribute to that? I think those two core jobs would kind of be ideal. So we'll see where that
Yeah,
takes me.
definitely in a very saturated market. Being in Toronto, you got one of the original six hockey
Yeah,
teams, which
yeah.
is a Goliath. They could suck for 30 years and
Hey,
still sell out
relax.
every game. Like, no, they got one of the
But that's
strongest
fan
brands
loyalty for you, right? Like
in
that's
all of
identity.
sports, not just
It's
hockey, all sports.
Yeah. No, the brand that exists here, and I think we've seen it. Like we see it with the Raptors, and it's funny. I wasn't really paying attention to the CFL, but I see it in CFL markets too, where like when you have fans who are committed to a story, to an identity, to history, they're never letting that go. Like even when I go to Marlies games, the Marlies have not been around for as long as the Leafs. But when people are like ride or die for the team, like when it comes to paying their deposits, they're ready to go. They're in this, they're doing this, like they love it. So yeah. Like, yeah. Getting to work here to me is a dream.
So you must get to see some cool stuff working with inside of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Could you just talk to us a little bit about what that is for anybody who doesn't live in Canada? They might not know, but that's the Goliath of sports organizations in Canada.
Yeah.
What are the member teams, the big
Yeah.
ones, and what are some of the little niche, smaller ones that people might not have known, but are also under the umbrella of MLSE?
Yeah. MLSE, like you said, it's a Goliath, owns a lot. So Raptors, Leafs, Toronto FC. Then we've got Argos, Toronto Marlies, which is the NHL affiliate, and then Raptors 905, which is based out of Mississauga, which is the NBA affiliate. We also have an esports team, so Raptors Uprising. We've got the live entertainment side of the business. So whenever you come to a concert at Scotiabank Arena or Coca-Cola Coliseum, I believe history is under that. That's something that MLSE kind of like oversees as well. So there's a lot that happens here. There's a lot that's being done. And I think one of the things to me that always amazes me, like, because being on the outside looking in, you never really know what's taking place or what's happening. But there are people who are doing work on so many different properties and are making sure that the business overall is such a success. And I think sometimes working in the front office, things feel a little disconnected, but there are people that are doing jobs in so many parts of the business to make sure that all of our teams are successful. So yeah, getting to work in this space, it's been like night and day, because prior to that, I was working in community sport, and a lot of it is like you're one person doing 45 jobs, and you get here and there's like so many niche roles that exist, so many important roles that exist to make sure that like the players are playing their best, that the business is generating as much revenue as it can, that things are going well, that fans and concert goers are having a good time. So I learn a lot daily, and it's really, really great to kind of get to be part of the space.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few things that made me think. Obviously, the Marlies compared to the Leafs, you've got the NHL for the Leafs and the AHL for the Marlies.
Yeah.
There's two different leagues. It's the same market, the same city, but the dynamic has got to be a lot different. So what are some of the challenges or even some of the advantages of working for a smaller club where maybe your name doesn't ring bells the same way as like a Toronto Maple Leafs or a Toronto Raptors, but you still have the same challenges of trying to fill the stadium, trying to fill the stands, trying to sell jerseys, trying to sell partnerships. What are some of the challenges or the nuance of working on a smaller franchise?
Well, I think you mentioned some of them. The fact that we're in the same city as our kind of like parent club, like there's so many other clubs that exist in the AHL. Like a perfect example, the Tampa Bay Lightning, their AHL affiliate is based out of Syracuse. So on a regular day, other than the players that move up and down, they have no connection. In Syracuse, the Syracuse team or Crunch can like dominate that market. Everybody's going to be interested in going to watch them. They're probably competing against the University of Syracuse. That's it. Like, whereas us, like, we're maybe a 15-minute drive from Coca-Cola Coliseum to Scotiabank Arena. So you deal with a lot of those challenges where it's almost like trying to get fans to understand and see that there are two different products that are available here. I think one of the benefits, though, is that we always kind of refer to the Marlies as like this place that develops your Toronto Maple Leafs. So perfect example of this is like somebody like William Nylander, who now plays for the Leafs. He used to play for the Marlies. So there are people who maybe not be able to afford to see William Nylander play on the Leafs when it gets to a particular price point. But if they had been following him in the early stages of his career, you get to come and see Willie at a certain point in his career, at a certain dollar value. You're still energetic and excited about it. And you get to be a Marlies fan forever. So like there's the price point piece, there's the accessibility piece. But again, still the challenge of people who are like, we live in a city where people are Leafs fans forever. And some of them will just be like, no matter what you do, I'm not interested in going to a Marlies game. So I think the other part of it for us has been, how do we explore new markets? And I think I've played a really big part in like, how do we tap into some of the newer markets that are emerging? There's a lot of grassroots organizations such as Black Girl Hockey Club, Hockey Equality, Hockey Diversity Alliance that are looking to help racialized people be a lot more kind of like invested in hockey. How do we tap into some of those new markets, new Canadians, to get them to become like solely Marlies fans and be able to engage with us that way? And I think we're seeing some growth there. So it's a lot of strategy, like a lot of like tapping into some of the connections back to the Leafs, but also making sure that we're filling in any gaps that maybe the Leaf market is not necessarily tapping into.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up, like tapping into new emerging markets, because I know me and Courtney last time we did a little brain exercise. We're like, how would we expand the awareness of the CFL? Like we were trying to engage more youth or engage more women. Like, what are some of the initiatives that the Marlies are doing right now to tap into those emerging markets? Like you mentioned some organizations that you guys are working with, but what are some practical things that the Marlies are doing right now?
Yeah, so I know last year, one of the ideas that I proposed, and like one of our ticket reps actually carried this and did a really great job, was we knew that like young adults are a big part of the city. Obviously, we've got schools like York, TMU, we've got U of T. So at like Humber, how do we start tapping into some of those young adults who, again, like they might be interested in sport, but can't necessarily afford to go to a Leafs or Raptors game right now, or just kind of looking for more of like a social kind of thing where you can come get like cheap drinks, hang out with your friends, keep it social, keep it fun. So we actually promoted something called a varsity night where we provided like a discounted ticket that also included some food and beverage items. And we picked midday, like a day in the week that wasn't interrupting like their potential weekend social plans, and worked with some universities, spread it out. Kind of like the messaging actually ended up taking a life of its own and ended up on like Reddit chat. So we had a lot of people being able to tap into it. But like it's just kind of looking for some of those unique markets, and not necessarily just being like, okay, how do we call them up straight shooters and be like, would you like to come to a game? But finding ways that they're really like tapped into. So like utilizing an influencer strategy has been a really important thing for us to maybe get more young families into the room. And then throughout MLSE in general, social impact and equity, diversity, and inclusion have become real big priorities. So on the Marley side as well as on the league side, we actually host 4 social impact nights. So it's an Indigenous celebration night that will have Black History Month, gender equality / equity month, and then a pride game. And then it's just creating kind of like a safe space and reminding a lot of these groups that like, we're here to support you. This is a game especially for you. How do we kind of create space for them to come in and elevate those games a little bit more? So we're always looking for ways in game, on our socials, through storytelling to remind of like a wide variety of people that live in the city and in the GTA that like, we can be the sports team for you. There's something that's going to connect you here. And in addition to that, you just get to come and watch fun hockey. And I think we're doing that successfully. Hopefully we can like, scale up on that and make it sure it's like a greater success over the course of the season. But I think we'll get there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I feel like the community has to be part of any successful team because ultimately, the team calls people to ask them to pay money to come to a game, and you want to feel like as a fan that you're getting value back and that the relationship is not purely transactional. Like, I mean, it's obviously you're buying a ticket, but the more you feel like the team is invested into the community that you're a part of, then that fandom can extend past game day in a lot of cases.
Yeah, no, and it changes so many things. Like I think about some of the research that I've done, like some of the things that we've kind of like executed. I know in the NFL, Green Bay, I think their fans kind of like have a chance to own a portion of the team. I've seen some clubs where like they'll have their players actually call their members or like do a FaceTime or like visit them. But that way people feel like you're a little bit more invested and it's not just kind of like a show. Like when you get a guy who's getting paid like what, 3 mil, probably even more than that, to like show up to somebody's house and be like, hey, I'm just so excited that you paid to be a member this year. Like, shake their hand, take a picture. That person's going to be like, I'm invested in this forever. So, that fan engagement and community development aspect goes such a long way. And it's a really big part of the business.
So of all of these projects, and not necessarily just the community ones, sometimes it might be like a special event, maybe a concert that happened, anything of any project that you've worked on, which one has been your favorite?
Ooh. Oh, that's a big question. I'll probably take it back to my time at the Leafs. So 2021, I had a chance to be part of their management development program, which was like the most exciting, most humbling, most like greatest learning experience I've ever had in my entire life. And they gave me a chance so it was a fellowship program. And a lot of those programs, sometimes you feel like you're just coming to be a fly on the wall and listening and learning.
Just get coffee.
Exactly. And get coffee. What I like to emphasize to people is like, this was not like an internship that I had done in like 2015. They understood that I was a capable adult who had come with skills. Like, we'll teach you something really quickly, but like, we need you to get in the game and work, like, cause you're working with people who have 9 to 5 jobs. You're trying to win hockey games. You're trying to win a cup. How do you actually contribute to what it is we're doing here? And so like, I felt like after month 1 or 2, I felt like I was working my 9 to 5. It was so natural. Like, and so I remember getting to be there. I did everything from like scouting to like PR, business relations, hockey operations, like, and before that, like I watched hockey, but I wouldn't say I was somebody who was there like breaking down plays or like skill development, but I really got to kind of get into the niche of things. And so I'd say one of my favorite things was on the scouting side, getting to understand kind of how we utilize technology and working towards kind of like creating some scouting materials. I don't want to say too much, but like getting to learn and develop some of those aspects on my own end and understanding like what teams in the league and like even what teams in other sports are utilizing. I know football is really big on like video and like making sure that they're capturing certain things. I heard Tom Brady uses like this program that a lot of other sports teams use, like as a player. And I'm sitting there watching this thing and I'm like, Tom Brady uses this shit. This is like this is a lot. Like, I'm cutting this up and I don't know that I get what I'm doing, but like, you start to like see it and understand the game a little bit more. Like, and even when you start to watch it in real life, you're kind of like catching so many things that you would have never expected yourself to catch. And it's so funny because like now when I'm on Twitter and I'm watching sports live or I'm seeing people comment on sports, I'm just like, y'all don't have a clue. You don't know what's going on. You think you know. You're sitting here talking about, I read some ESPN stats. You guys don't even know what you're really looking for in a scouting report. Like, so yeah, I would say, I guess getting to do some of those scouting aspects and really open up my mind was probably one of my favorite areas to work in. And then we also worked on a special project that I actually really got to lead with they used to be called the PWHPA. They're now the Professional Women's Hockey League. So this is before they actually became a hockey league, but they were doing kind of like a tour series where a lot of the players got to like stop in different cities and play. And I remember getting to lead the one in Toronto and getting to work with all of our different stakeholders and the PA at the time and figuring out what their needs and wants were and how we could support them. And really kind of like getting to make decisions and working closely with our leadership to see how we could support them. So that I think was a really good experience. And one that I think really prepared me for the job that I have now too.
So your hockey IQ has just come a long way then.
Take it easy. I don't know what you're about to ask me, but yeah.
Oh, no. I don't have a hockey IQ.
Oh,
My hockey IQ is 0.0. I could tell you, I know what the blue line is, and I know what a hat trick is, and I know what Wayne Gretzky's office was. Okay? That's it.
I feel like that's like, everybody, like, a lot of people, you'll be like, oh, tell me what you know about hockey. They'll be like, Wayne Gretzky. Like, easy. And you know what? That's enough. That's good enough.
No, but I appreciate great athletes, but I also know that hockey is one of the games that, I mean, all sports are trending towards using more technology and finding ways, whether it's trying to predict the player workload and trying to back them off of hard workouts when they're starting to hit certain thresholds, or if it's, using advanced stats like expected goals or finding the hot spots on the ice for a player, or even in soccer, they're using similar technology to and like data analytics.
Yeah.
So I think those things are amazing. And it's kind of cool to see them trickling down from, really it was only the NHL, NBA, and then it goes to a big organization like MLSE gets their hands on it, and it trickles down to all their properties. And then it gets to the colleges, and the film study that you can do now in high school is night and day from where it was when we were all in high school. Because that was, I don't even know, DVDs. Like, yeah, it's very, very different when you've got digital files that could be editable on the go. So lots of data points, and it's cool to see where it will go next. So I think you were about to slip that you guys had the chat GBT of film before.
He had chat GBT of film. Jeez.
That'd be crazy.
I would have packed that up and sold it somewhere.
Yeah, like I think show me all the. Go ahead.
No, it's interesting. Like I think when we talk about sport, technology, R&D, like I think there's actually a pecking order. I want to say like baseball has really been big on like how they utilize technology and stats. Then you have like the NFL, NBA. I think hockey is like trending upwards, but hockey is a very traditional sport. So I think it's something that they're really getting into. And there's probably some teams that are ahead of the curve compared to others. But like when I see and hear and understand some other sports, like I can go on an NHL like staff directory right now and they'll probably have a friggin' tech department of like 59 video guys plus Tom Brady, like I mentioned. Whereas like with some hockey teams, like maybe it's not something that they're necessarily like invested in just yet, because to them, like traditionally they're good with a sheet of paper and watching a guy play in a barn and be like, yeah, I understand his game. So it differs, I guess.
So is there anything that you're excited for the future of like sports business or even sports technology? Like, what are you excited about that's coming down the pipeline? If you can share that, either what your organization is doing or what you're just seeing in the industry in general.
That's a good question. What am I excited about most? I don't know. That's a hard question. I feel like you know what's tricky for me? I feel like we talk a lot about trends that are happening or like things that feel like they're going to be like these really big moments and then they kind of like just fizzle out. I don't know enough about NFTs, but I feel like NFTs was like one of those things, or like we had so many conversations about sports betting and then the province was kind of like, well, that was cute, like kibosh it. So I don't know. I think for me, one trend that I had thought I was seeing, but like now working on the other side of it, I don't I feel like there needs to be some space, like the idea of how close we get to connect and be with athletes just due to technology. Like obviously athletes get to own their own platforms and like get to share their own stories and get to allow us to like present, or like they get to present themselves to us like however they want through brands and marketing. But I think getting to work on this side of things, you remember that like athletes are people and they're not just products. And I think sometimes sports news and stories that we hear, you're reminded that like we have these parasocial relationships to athletes. Like you don't actually know Draymond Green. So like somebody's gonna sit at their computer at home and be like, oh my gosh, like why is Draymond acting like this? I feel like I know what's going on. And you're like, no, you don't. You actually don't know this person. Like you know what they presented to you and what you've been able to access. So yeah, like I think the other side of that is like, how do some of the trends actually impact like some of our relationships to sport and how we engage with people and athletes? But I'm interested to see how that all kind of plays out.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because we're about to do a podcast episode and we're gonna cover KD's investments and stuff like that. So stay tuned, guys. Make sure you guys subscribe and like a little plug real quick there. But you bring up like players and being connected with them through like technology. So like social media, a lot of players are now starting their own podcasts or they're really building on their brands. What do you think is missing in like the Canadian landscape? Because I know like the NBA, the NFL, even like I was just reading up Ohtani, if he came to Canada, like how that would have impacted the Rogers communications, and like it would have been like they would have paid like $700 million, but they would have made like billions of dollars over the next few years off of like their cell phone ads, off of the Blue Jays tickets, off of broadcasting rights. What are we missing from like even the Toronto Marlies, or sometimes we talk about U Sports and athletes building their brand? What's missing in Canada? Is it just a population thing?
I think it's a population thing. I think it's always kind of also kind of like how we perceive like celebrity in this country. Like I'm glad you talked about like U Sports. Like you think about NIL and like what Canadian athletes are probably getting over here. It's like night and day. I think about, and it's funny because like I think about the NHL itself. It is technically an American league, but like if you look at the NHL salary cap, if you look at player brands and identities, it's totally different than what you see in sports like basketball and football. And I think, yeah, it's just because in America, like the idea of like celebrity and like pop culture and like the craze of like, entertainment in the show is just so big. Whereas I feel like that's not necessarily the case here. Like, I feel like we're almost too, Canadians are still very Canadian. We're a little too chill. We're just like very, like quiet about everything that we do. Yeah, I don't know. It feels different. I feel like if we were to ever get to a place also where we prioritize sport as much as Americans do, then it would probably be a completely different situation. Like I mentioned, there are teams in the AHL that exist in towns where like, if you were to get there, you'd be like, get me out of here instantly. I could not live here. They probably don't even have a Target. The biggest store is like a Walmart. But like people here, I can go to a hockey game. I can go to a high school football game on a Thursday, Friday night. Like they're going to be there. Sport is ingrained in like their identity and their culture. And I think it's something that we don't have here. I don't know that we ever get to a point where we will, and it might be a population thing. But I also think it comes down to like how from like youth sport all the way up, like we prioritize the value of sport, which can be a good or a bad thing. Like there have been times where like I see stories in America where sport has been their everything, and you're kind of like, okay, well, you're at a reading level of the second grade and you're in grade 12. That could be an issue. Like, how are you prioritizing education plus building like a holistic player? But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that we ever get to that point. Hopefully someday, for my benefit.
You mentioned that you talked about your aspirations and one day being a president of an NBA team, which I'm rooting for you. I've always been rooting for you to do big in sports, because like your passion for sports is undeniable. But I kind of want to take a step back, because I know we talk about practicality on this podcast, and we talk about like what can people do to get into sports business. And a lot of people think like, oh, I have to be an athlete and I've had to, study something in sports. Like Courtney, our guy here, he's an athlete, but he didn't study sports, but he's been around the sports business for such a long time. And you yourself, you studied poli-sci, and you were going to become a lawyer. So you're not necessarily in the sports. You weren't necessarily, brought up in the sports industry or in the sports realm, but here you are, a very important role in the Toronto Marlies. But there's something that I think the Toronto Management Coaching Development Program, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
How did you get into that type of a program with your background?
Definitely like work experience, a little bit of luck, and a lot of Jesus. Like when I tell you guys, there's no version of this I can genuinely say where I thought I was going to have a chance to work in the NHL just based on like the demographics, based on like the jobs that I was getting along the way. But perfect timing, and I will give myself credit to like the fact that I had said, I'd worked those jobs, I was doing those side hustles, I was really building my resume. So just a little bit of context on the program, similar to the Wayne and Teresa Embry Fellowship program that the Toronto Raptors run. I know it's been a popular one for the last few years. The Toronto Maple Leafs were working towards making sure that they were creating space for individuals who are kind of already in that space or kind of already like leaders in a variety of industries to get to come and work in hockey, specifically racialized individuals, BIPOC individuals, people that are from marginalized groups. Because in the hockey space, if we're all being very honest with ourselves, on the ice, in the boardrooms, the sport looks very one way. So they were working towards making sure that they were kind of broadening that horizon and that spectrum. And I think what I liked most about this program, initially I was nervous because I was applying for the program during a time, obviously, where there had been this like global awakening of racial tension and the realities of anti-Blackness in places like Canada and America. And so I was kind of like, do I end up in this program and kind of end up a guinea pig? Like, is this going to be something where they promoted it really nicely and I get there and everyone's kind of like, okay, this was great for the first week, but like now, like kind of like go be in your corner. So I think I was initially nervous. Like when I had applied for it, I applied and didn't even really think anything of it. But being in the program, I also recognized it was an opportunity for me to develop the program because I was the first person to actually ever be in the management stream of it. And the program taught me a ton. It opened up my eyes to so much. Like I had worked in sport at that point, I think for 6 years, but getting to see how sport leaders think, kind of like the resourcing around them, what their thought process is, what they're looking for when they're putting together a team, getting to ask questions to some amazing people. Like there are people that I worked with who were like Olympians who had won Stanley Cups, and you're just like casually getting to be like, hey, like, how are your kids? So about that time, like, tell me what your thoughts are. And that kind of like opened up my mind to so much. Like I said, during my master's degree, they taught us a lot about being critical thinkers, but like getting to kind of put that in action and knowing the types of questions to ask and like making sure that I was being very available to like do any tasks that were provided. And like also going into the program and being like, okay, these are the goals that I'm setting for myself and this is what I want to achieve, played a really big role. So I think when people are looking for opportunities to kind of like elevate themselves, it's one of two things. It wasn't just like, okay, I did this Maple Leafs program out of university. Like I had worked my way towards that. I was willing to take the jobs where in the summertime during training camp, I'm coming to work for the University of Waterloo Warriors who hadn't won a football game in God knows how long, but like I'm trucking along equipment to make sure that I'm developing that type of skill. Or I was working at really small provincial sport organizations to understand as much as I could about brand and business and writing policy, and the importance of funding and community engagement and development, and how like Olympic teams are put together. And all of that ultimately helped me work towards getting to where I was. So I think the importance of like always being willing to like open yourself and humble yourself to any type of opportunity that exists in sport is how you get to where you really need to be. Because at some point, like my parents were even kind of like, so you're quitting your 9 to 5, like you have an actual job, you're going to quit your job to go do this program for a year. And I was like, yeah, I think it could be a deal breaker for me. And it has been. Like I ended up obviously getting a job with the team. And yeah, so I think just kind of like asking yourself what your long-term goals are and what you're willing to do to get there. And even if it means taking small opportunities, they ultimately turn into big ones.
Nice. So what are some opportunities that exist right now with either MLSE or anyone's that you're aware of outside of your organization that either students or people, fresh graduates can become a part of and kind of break into the sports business industry?
This is my favorite question because I get messages from students all the time being like, I don't know where to find jobs. They're everywhere. So I think the biggest thing that people have to remember is the sports industry is just that, it's an industry. There are so many big things that you can do. I think people are like, okay, they think they want to work in sports, so they think that automatically means they have to be the GM, or they have to be a coach, or they have to be an athletic therapist. There are so many different things that you can do. There are campaigns that you guys see in the city, in Nathan Phillips Square, that somebody that works in marketing for the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Toronto Raptors, who has probably never played a day of basketball or hockey in their lives, got to put together. They strategized, they ideated, they worked with a graphic designer who got to put that together. And like now they get to showcase that. So people have to remember there's a ton of different things that you get to do in sports. So kind of figure out what it is you want to do. Don't feel like you have to be the person that's going to be running the team and putting the franchise together. There's a ton of ways to pursue your passion. And then I would recommend utilizing, when you're still in school, going to your athletic department, seeing what opportunities kind of exist there. If you're not in an internship program and have summers off, reach out to organizations that are not necessarily looking for students on like a school track and see if there's any internship opportunities there. I would recommend looking at marketing agencies that work with sports organizations, that they're helping kind of like execute some of the things that they do. I know a really good one is T1 Agency. They used to do a lot of work with like organizations like Nike and Adidas. So you're not necessarily working for Nike and Adidas, but you're getting the opportunities to kind of like execute some of their brand planning. Another website that I really like is called Teamworks. It lists NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB, NCAA, AHL, ECHL jobs. So like there's a plethora of jobs that you can look through. They're updating it every single day. Internships, entry-level sports positions, would recommend that. And then there's another website, it's called circ.ca, SIRC. That's where I used to find a lot of like my community sport, provincial, national sport organization related jobs. And you can find a plethora of roles, anything in research and academia, anything like the practical side of sport. I would recommend like those two websites to go to, and then going to like teams specific websites to see what jobs that they have available. LinkedIn is also another great resource. And this might also sound weird, but like social media, sometimes if you're following the right people in sports organizations, they themselves are looking for people that are going to be like graphic designers or like people who do marketing, or sometimes, yeah, like they're looking for a scout, and that comes through like interactions that might happen on the internet. So make sure that you always have your portfolio ready, make sure you're always getting the experience that you need, make sure you're presenting yourself well. You never know who's going to come across your LinkedIn page or Twitter page, and ultimately work towards developing relationships, and hopefully something works out for you.
Jeez.
Holy smoke.
Yeah, that was a great way to just there you go. That's a lot of gems for people to end off on. All right.
Hold on. Can I ask you this? I just want to ask you one parting question, because this has been absolutely more than we could have hoped for. So we appreciate the gems. Now, I want to know, who are your 3 favorite athletes of all time?
Ooh, what?
I gave you 3 because 1 is too much stress, but 3
I know who number 1 is. Unless it's changed.
Oh no, absolutely not.
Give me three athletes, any sport, any discipline, any era.
Of all time?
Yeah, I need 3 though.
And does it have to be solely based on sports skill, or like
they could be from your neighborhood?
Okay, I was gonna say sometimes I have emotional attachments to athletes that I don't even know.
Oh yeah, not the best. Your favorite.
Okay, my 3 favorite. Number 1. This like it's been my favorite athlete since like 2007, 6, maybe. LeBron, Raymond James. Nothing is ever gonna change that.
Yeah.
Okay. LeBron's a great athlete. He seems like a great family man. He's an entrepreneur. He's doing what needs to get done. This guy's probably going to be the greatest sports mind by the time all is said and done. I always talk about this. Like, I can't wait till the day I get to have kids and be like, let me tell you about the time I was living and LeBron James was that guy. The way everybody's always talking to us about Michael Jordan. Like, I was born in the 90s, so I didn't really get to like fully embrace and understand Michael Jordan, but like getting to see LeBron James, I feel like this is what people were experiencing back then. That's number 1. Number 2. Ooh, Serena Williams. She's an amazing athlete. She's done so many great things. And then number 3. Ooh, this is hard. Oh my gosh. Number 3. I don't know why. I don't actually think he's number 3, but his name just keeps like popping in my head. Do you guys remember Johnny Flynn, who used to play at Syracuse University, the University of Syracuse? Basketball player Johnny Flynn. Y'all don't know Johnny Flynn?
That's your 3rd favorite athlete of all time?
That's why I'm saying his name keeps popping in my mind, and I just keep thinking about the times when I used to watch him in college, and I'd be like, yo, Johnny Flynn, I'm a fan. I don't know why he's like just, I need to go Google him. I wonder what he's doing these days.
That is absolutely not what I expected.
Okay, so maybe it's not Johnny Flynn. Maybe he's just poking out or like sticking out in my mind.
You couldn't even have said Carmelo Anthony?
Nah. I wouldn't give it to Melo.
All right. Well, hey, Johnny Flynn is up there with Serena.
Oh, no, wait. I might have to take that back.
Can you take it back?
This is on the record. I know.
Are you allowed to take those back?
Oh, actually,
Johnny Flynn.
Number 3. Sorry. Give me a redo.
All right. You got it.
I hope Johnny Flynn is doing well.
This is your top 3.
Number 3. I can't even believe I didn't even think of including her in this. Candace Parker. I watched Candace Parker from her college days to, like, I think about what she's done for the league. I think about who she is. Yeah, it's Candace Parker. I remember watching Candace Parker when she was playing, like, the All-American McDonald game. Wow. Oh, my God. I apologize, Candace.
Flynn must have had, like, one of the great games.
Johnny Flynn's Google search is about to spike up.
I just Googled it.
Doing well.
Yo, you know what? He played 11 games in 2011 and 18 games in 2012.
Where is he now, though?
He's super retired.
Working at a grocery store.
I hope he's okay.
With all due respect.
Johnny Flynn, that's crazy.
I hope he parlayed some of that NBA money into something good, so he don't have to be at that grocery store. But yo, Marian, we really appreciate you. We really, really do appreciate you for coming on the pod. Can you plug your stuff wherever you want people to connect with you? If you want people to connect with you, some people don't want people reaching out.
Yeah, mostly I would say LinkedIn. I think my LinkedIn name is right now is just Marian, and then my last name. Always willing and welcoming in terms of receiving messages. One of the biggest things, though, is that if you are going to connect with me on LinkedIn, please send me a message. Something as simple as, hey, listen to you on the MVP podcast. Would love to have a chat with you. I'll be like, okay, this is great. Let's talk. No messages. Sometimes I'm just like, I don't know if I'm feeling this. But you send me a little personalized message. We can have a coffee chat. We can talk on Zoom. Whatever works best for everyone. But for me, relationships are a big deal. And I think they help kind of take you from point A to point B. So would recommend LinkedIn. And
Awesome. Well, we hope to see more things from you. Any last words, Courtney?
No, this has been awesome. And I think, if anybody's hoping to break into the sports industry, there's a clear blueprint laid out for you right here. Everybody's path is their own, but there's been a path blazed here. There's a trail blazed. So thanks for the gems.
Awesome. All right, that's it for us. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.